We saw time and time again, especially during the Trump presidency, that anytime that they wanted to, anytime that they wanted to, the Republicans could have reined Trump in, could have. And there's no argument that they couldn't have. They could have very well have reined him in. There was two, at least, impeachment opportunities where they could have got rid of him, but they didn't, because just as with Johnson, Trump delivered them a victory and was winning them very positive, appraisal. He was giving them that bit of electoral magic. Now, of course, Trump has ultimately poisoned the Republican Party over there. In fact, you come up to whoever will be the next, nomination for the Republican Party. If Trump decides to run, well, he's already got it. I think something about 30 or 40% of his party still supports him. And if he doesn't decide to run, well, effectively, whoever gets Daddy Trump's endorsement will win. And unfortunately, this is a very similar situation we're seeing now in the Tory party. Boris Johnson came in on riding that wave of populism, again, very similar to Trump, and won a very, very big electoral victory, to which even many of the Tories themselves can't even contemplate of winning such seats in the Red Wall, which, let's face it, given their current stance, they're probably on the way to losing, given certainly how the levelling up agenda is going for them, as well as many other things as well. But they are so scared to get rid of him because he won them that massive majority, and they are so worried that if they get rid of him, they might never be able to do this. So as far as they are concerned, drinking this Kool Aid for the time being is fine. But the problem is this damages not only them, it damages our very democracy as well, as we've seen today, with Boris Johnson repeating an outright conspiracy theory about Keir Starmer being involved in the Jimmy Savile case. Again, it is completely factually wrong for him to say that, but the Prime Minister chose to do that and has been defended by, as we've seen just very recently, a couple of very senior Tories saying, no, he was fine to say that, but he is repeating a conspiracy theory. And we have seen in America what happens when a leader starts to endorse a conspiracy theory. It ended up, of course, in the January the 6th insurrection in America. Might not end up as obviously severe as that over here, but could very well have some bad consequences over here. So before we go jumping into this article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So on with this. This comes from The Guardian with the title of never mind the wine fridges, the Tory party is drunk on Kool Aid. If you've ever wondered what Jim Jones's corpse would have looked like if it had spent 3 weeks getting bleached and bloated by a Ghanaian river, it floated up in the House of Commons dispatch box yesterday at 3:30 p.m. Let's begin with some real talk. The Prime Minister is under police investigation for multiple breaches of his own COVID laws. At least 4 gatherings or parties in which Boris Johnson was directly involved in are being probed by the Met, including the private one in his flat. In total, police are investigating 12 potentially law-breaking Downing Street parties, which took place after the British people had been ordered by him to live under the most draconian restrictions imposed in peacetime. The global Britain that Johnson promised saw him yesterday bin off a call to the Russian president, who is apparently on the brink of invasion, so that he could explain that he needs to wait for the police officers to decide if he went to an illicit party in his own home. The Conservative MPs are somehow able to make their peace with all this is increasingly resembling as cult members accepting the latest transparent lies and failures of a cult leader. Suitcases full of Kool Aid seem to have been wheeled into Boris Johnson's meeting with the Tory MPs last night. And 2 weeks ago, Birmingham Northfield MP Gary Sambrook was widely reported to be one of the leading lights of a plot to remove Johnson. Last night, he issued a dispatch from the compound in which he declared the PM to be, quote, the Boris Johnson we love and who has delivered. Sorry, Gary, but wake up. This ends with a very bungling SWAT team going through the window and discovering the whole place is wired. As for what Johnson said to his followers last night, he is reported to have compared himself to Othello, and he seems to think he was, quote, always seeing the best in people. Righto, to confirm, the country isn't just being run by a guy who can't even understand the plot to Othello, but by a guy who can't even seem to understand the plot of Othello and is writing a book about Shakespeare. It's called Not Giving a F, Gary. Look it up. That said, it's good to see the PM getting in his excuses in early and shopping Desmonia to try to the cops for an ABBA party. And yet, for someone who normally puts the I am into iambic pentameter, Johnson will only speak in the first person plural when it comes to taking responsibility for what his investigator Sue Gray found to be failures of leadership. What a tell! As he preferred it yesterday in his statement to the Commons, we must look to ourselves in the mirror and we must learn. Well, who's we? Face it, Gary. He's the least convincing man in the mirror since Michael Jackson. In fact, speaking of pedos, the Prime Minister chose to choose one as a fig leaf. Such a Churchillian move. With the hour when the hour of leadership came, Johnson opted to knowingly advance a very grotesque and indefensible conspiracy lie that Keir Starmer failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile when he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. All Conservatives who regard themselves as decent need to really ask themselves, is that much of a leap from this sort of thing for the other paedophile-based conspiracies that are increasingly part of a dangerous undertow of global populist politics? If they are not up to it, it will continue. And on past form, the Met will spend months not getting to the bottom of things. Should any fines be issued, I'm sure Johnson will get some Tory donor to set up a blind trust to pay for his. He should start running a cash phone line during PMQs like a proper televangelist. Yet, those who remember what the past 2 years were actually like, i.e. everyone, can be glad that Sue Gray's update acknowledged something critical. Yes, she stated that working in Downing Street during the pandemic was challenging. Those challenges, however, also applied to key and frontline workers across the country who were working under equally, if not more demanding conditions, often at risk to their own health. The hardship under which citizens across the country worked, lived, and sadly even died while observing the government's regulations and guidance rigorously were known only too well. This is a vital counter to the quite frankly eye-popping number of anonymous exceptionalists briefings from Downing Street employees who talk about the saviour complex some staff apparently felt. Unsurprisingly, perhaps no one ended up being more elitist than the guys who were swept to power promising to smash elites and who turned out to regarding themselves as miles above the rest of the rules that were followed, even in the extremes, by silly little people like the actual head of state. But it always wasn't this way. By chance, one of my children last week visited Bletchley Park, which you know to be the epicenter of the Allied code-breaking operation during the World War II, without which the war might not have been won. And while their heroic efforts are judged to have shortened it by at least 2 and 4 years, at Bletchley, he tells me they only started serving beer at the end of the shift in 1944. To put that into perspective, by the stage that they were at, in the fourth rotor on the Enigma machine, and the possible combination that had leapt to the truly head-frying levels, the staff had been working around the clock at the facility for 5 years under the global war conditions under a constant threat of bombing, and flash forward to 2022 when they were getting pissed at 6 p.m. in the garden in May. The desk of Johnny's in Downing Street had then been stewarding a peacetime lockdown for 2 effing months. I mean, if you can't even do that without interventions of Prosecco, then just buck up. Run along and work into the interiors of the PR. This is the same self-awareness to the same rearguard ratio as people who listen to their occupation as a film producer. As things stand, influential members of the Conservative MPs are prepared to wake up and smell the cordite. But All the Tories defending Johnson and skirting over these insults to ordinary people shouldn't feel alone in the world. They have their spiritual cousins all over those who all craven Republicans who now refuse to condemn Donald Trump despite the fact that he is a known liar and a crook who will only cares about himself and thinks that the rules are for little people, and known that he regards even them with a mixture of amusement and contempt. Backing Johnson in the face of all this is really not too much different from scuttling down to a Mar-a-Lago to pay the obscene and hoping that you get smiled at. Come on, what's the worst that can happen? And that is, of course, the very worrying fact about this. This is an outright conspiracy lie that, if you know anything about the conspiratorial right, gets very often peddled. And the worrying thing is that now Johnson has chosen to endorse this. They're singing from the rooftops that he has chosen to do this. And those worrying thoughts of where this might go. Might one of these people decide to, well, put it this way, we've already had two MP murders very recently in this country. Unfortunately, I think this might happen, and under very similar conditions, backed by this insane conspiracy theory, to which now many top conservatives are now defending Boris Johnson from saying. We just had this morning Michael Gove endorse Boris Johnson saying that. We had the very drunk Nadine Dorries also endorsing Boris for saying that. When does it stop? If you can't acknowledge that this is an actual lie, well, then we've got some serious problems here. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And as always, we'll see you all next time.